Hello, humans of the world. It's me, Ellie Krug, on Ellie 2.0 radio on AM 950 in lovely Eden Prairie, Minnesota. How are you? I mean, like, really, how are you today? Because here in Minnesota, on Saturday, it is like summer, not even spring. And, you know, if you look at the next 10 days coming up, it ain't looking bad. So I am absolutely thrilled about that. But more than that, I am thrilled to be back to you again on another Saturday and Sunday when we do the replay, talking about idealism and idealists. You know, I am your resident idealist, and about trying to change the world, because it's pretty darn important, isn't it? We've got a good show. No, great show. Ellie, come on. We have a great show. The big interview is with a woman named Fawzia Kahn, who is an obstetrician turned artist. Yep. Now that's interesting right there. Who is opening an exhibit at the Hopkins Art Museum, the Hopkins Art Center in May. And it's an exhibit about women. And so stay tuned. You're going to like that interview. Oh, by the way, I happen to be a part of that exhibit, but I'd have her on even if I wasn't a part of it. And then you'll get my C block at the end of this. But let's begin, as I always do, with a featured idealist. And this is someone you know. Someone, it's a name that many of you are very familiar with, particularly if you watch CNN frequently, like I do. I am speaking about Van Jones. Although, as it turns out, Van is not his name. His name is actually Anthony Capel Jones, and he adopted the nickname of Van when he was a late teenager. So, but he goes by Van now for everything. And he has a fascinating story, so fascinating as an idealist that there's no way I can capture it in just a single segment. Maybe someday I'll come back and finish it. But let me give you, because I like to, you have the public persona, you see Van Jones, but I always like to go behind the scenes and tell you, like, how did he get there? So the story actually begins in 1968 when Van Jones was born, September of 68. And he was born in a town named Jackson, Tennessee. His mother was a high school teacher. His father was a middle school principal. So he had that education kind of bedrock right out of the blocks. But his grandfather was a minister in the Methodist Episcopal Church, and the grandfather would take Van Jones to conferences, like church-related, religious-related conferences. So, growing up, Van Jones had this kind of education, religious type of background, and sounded like a very solid background. But he described himself as kind of a bizarre, geeky kid. That's how Van Jones described himself. But it's interesting, as I read about him, I learned that he and I have something in common. So Van Jones, like Ellie Krug, his heroes were the Special Ks, Dr. King, Bobby Kennedy, and added John Kennedy. In fact, on his bulletin board in his bedroom, he had a special Kennedy section to remind him about idealists and idealism. I love that. He went to college. Graduated from high school in Jackson, Tennessee, and went to college at the University of Tennessee, and then UT Martin, must be Martin, Tennessee, and then while he was in college, he tried his stint at journalism. So he interned at a couple of newspapers and then for the Associated Press. Pretty great stats. His study of school in college was political science and communication. And boy, he was well on his way to getting a really great bend as a journalist, and then he decided not to do that. He decided instead to go to law school. Again, another something in common with Ellie Krug. Okay, and I'll stop with the commonalities right there because I am not a Van Jones by any stretch. But he went to law school and he got lucky. He went to Yale. And we know in America right now, if you go to one of two schools, particularly Yale or Harvard, I mean, and there are other Ivy League schools, but if you go to one of those two, that's a ticket. He went to Yale Law School. And so you have this black kid from Tennessee in New Haven, Connecticut, for the very first time. And he's in law school, and then something happened. Remember the Rodney King beating, and then the Rodney King trial, and then you remember the riots, and then you remember massive protests after that. And by the way, that's like 1992. And guess what, everyone? Guess what? That pattern has continued up to today. Thankfully, we broke it the week before last with the Derek Chauvin trial. We broke the pattern at least once. We did. But at any rate, the Rodney King protests begin. And Van Jones is in law school at Yale. And there's a group of lawyers about human rights who draft him and a couple of other law students to go to San Francisco to monitor the protests. So you've got law students monitoring how the protests are going to avoid any police brutality and things like that. And wouldn't you know it, while he's at the protest, Van Jones gets arrested, along with some other law students. Ultimately, the district attorney dropped those charges, but that thing about being arrested, according to Van Jones himself, it radicalized him. And he goes back to Yale Law School after that, and he starts doing something that all idealists do. He started looking around. He started to open his eyes, and he realized, that his law school classmates, white law school classmates, white color, were, using all kinds of drugs. No consequences for them. At worst, it was rehabilitation. But the projects, the black kids in the projects, 3 blocks from, Yale Law School, doing the same drugs, even smaller quantities, and they were going to jail. And this registered with him in a big way. And he started to better understand how the system is rigged against people who are not white. So he gets out of law school. He ends up going back to San Francisco, and he ends up creating, when he's in San Francisco, he's just, he's barely out of law school. And he goes back and he goes to San Francisco and he creates this program, which is pretty radical for its time in the mid-'90s, about tracking down police officers with histories of violence. It was called the Bay Area Police Watch. And what he and his colleagues were doing was they were collecting data on the complaints against police officers and problematic precincts and accumulating that data and using it then to go after the police officers that were most problematic. In fact, they started going after a particular white police officer who had beaten an unarmed black man to death. From there, he then he went on to create the Ellie Baker Center for Human Rights, which was, in California, there was Proposition 21 going on, which was to elevate the crime, the penalties, the sentences for various crimes. In other words, put more people in prison. And he campaigned against that unsuccessfully. The Ellie Baker Center, so he's created a nonprofit in his late 20s. The Ellie Baker Center goes on then to do work to reform the criminal justice system in California. Eventually, Van Jones, Katrina occurred. He got involved in New Orleans about doing some relief work. And eventually he starts to focus on the environment. And what Van Jones, now remember, keeps his eyes open. He's a man who uses imagination. And what he does then is he starts to advocate for green jobs that could lift up people from marginalized communities to give them jobs while at the same time helping to make the environment more green. It was, and Van Jones was before the Green New Deal. And he was so much a proponent of this that what he called the green collar economy, so much so that he became a special advisor to President Obama in March of 2009 to help about this green jobs. And at that point, Van Jones came to understand what happens in politics, because as soon as Van Jones was in the White House, right-wing media started mining past statements that Van Jones had made, because he got pretty radical after getting arrested and then seeing the disparities. And Van Jones didn't last 6 months at the White House before he resigned because of the firestorm brought by the right. From there, of course, Van Jones went on to become a commentator for CNN. He went on to do a number of other things. And then he also helped do this thing called Yes We Code, which was about giving 100,000 kids from marginalized communities jobs coding. And this is where the Minnesota connection comes in, because it turns out that Van Jones was a confidant to Prince, our lovely Prince. And one of the invisible founders of this hashtag Yes We Code program was Prince. But only Van Jones knew that, because you remember Prince was a Seventh-day Adventist, a Jehovah's Witness, and Prince did not ever want to be given recognition for his charitable deeds. And so it was only after Prince died that Van Jones told folks about what Prince did. So I'm out of time, as it turns out, but Van Jones, okay, when you see him on CNN, will you do me this favor? Tell yourself, oh, there's an idealist. And Van Jones, he's got more to come. I have no doubt about it. He's one of my favorite commentators. I love the man. I really do. Okay, well, that's it for the A block, where we talk about idealists. We're going to come back. We're going to give you the big interview with Fawzia Kahn, and then you'll get my C block. I mean, I hope you enjoy these shows, because I spend time on them, and I care about you. I do. So we'll be back in a second with the big interview. Bye. And we're back. Ellie 2.0 Radio on AM 950. Van Jones, next time you hear him or see him on TV, now you know a little bit more about him, okay? And as I said, we'll hear far more from that gentleman before it's all over. Okay, now for the big interview. I am thrilled, with a capital T, to be able to introduce you to Fawzia Kahn, who is both a medical doctor by training, but also an incredible artist, whom I had the pleasure of working with for an upcoming exhibition she is going to have at the Hopkins Art Center. Fawzia, are you on the line?
I am.
Hey, Fawzia, welcome to Ellie 2.0 Radio. I am thrilled to have you here. Can you, first of all, tell us about the installation that'll be at the Hopkins Art Center. Tell us a little bit about what it's about, and then I want to talk about your background, because it's fascinating. So go ahead.
Okay. So I was very lucky to get an Artist Initiative grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board for the year 2020. And I was thrilled to have it, and then the pandemic happened. But the project itself, I have made work about gender roles and women and the invisibility of what they do. And I wanted to do something that that addressed that And so my idea was that I would go out and interview women from around the state and create an installation that highlighted them. So I have 12 dish towels, flour sack dish towels, that are machine embroidered with the eyes of the women who I interviewed. I have created a synopsis or a bio on each woman that tells you a little bit about who they are and what they have done. And then I put together individual videos for each of the 12 women that were edited down from my interview, and then created a composite video that will be playing while these are on display.
Okay, so Fawzia, can I interrupt you? Because we should probably let everybody know right off the bat, I'm part of this installation. I'm one of the women that you interviewed, right?
Correct.
Okay. And what the title of the installation is what?
It's called Becoming Visible.
Okay. And it will and let's just get down the technical, and we'll come back to that before we end as well. It's going to be at the Hopkins Art Center, is that right? Correct.
It opens May 13th. There will be an opening reception from 6 to 8 p.m. And then there is an artist talk with me on May 20th, again from 6 to 8 p.m. And the show ends on June 19th.
Okay. And you've already had the installation at was it the Pillsbury Center in Minneapolis?
At the Phipps Art Center in Hudson, Wisconsin.
Oh, there you go.
I had the first 6 women out there. Yeah.
Okay, all right. And I happen to be, I think, one of them, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
All right. So we've got that out. Now, but Fawzia, this is a little bit more than, just women's eyes and on dish towels, okay? It's
correct.
Because really what we do is we see the eyes, but tell us more about, I mean, this is supposed to represent the role of women and how they are invisible, right, in the world.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So, my fault. I grew up in, I come from Pakistan originally. That's where my parents are from. And it's a fairly patriarchal society. And I think that actually most societies today are patriarchal to lesser or greater degrees. And I'm sorry, I have to kind of go into my background a little bit to explain this, if that's okay.
Please do. Please do.
So, I was a physician. I was an obstetrician gynecologist, and I practiced for 3 years until I had my child, and decided at that point to stay home. I was completely flabbergasted by the love I felt for this baby and the desire to stay home to raise my child. So I did that, and I went from this, very busy professional someone people look up to, right, who ask advice of, like your doctor, who's in charge, who deals with life and death situations, to basically being a housewife and a mother. My husband, luckily for me, is also a physician. And my mom kind of did the same thing. She was a housewife, but she was also a doctor, but she was home and worked part-time when she had us. And I look at what do women do in this world? And even though we're breaking glass ceilings now and we have a new, vice president who's a woman, the vast majority of women do a lot of work that is unacknowledged. A lot of the housework in the home is still done by women. Most of the child care is done by women. Dealing with schools for their children is done by women. Raising the children and giving them the messages that they're going to carry into their adulthood is done by women. And oftentimes that is in addition to working outside the home. And so I wanted to do a project that showed the breadth of what women actually do and the contributions that they make to society and to their communities beyond the job title that they may have. the other thing I wanted to do is also show all the different women that live, who call themselves Minnesotans. Immigrants, new immigrants, people whose families have lived here for generations, the diversity of Minnesota society today.
Okay, and we only have about a minute, but your dish towels are, I mean, they're also a little reflective of your heritage, right? Because at least you were raised Muslim, right? And the dish towels are you only see the eyes because that is reflective of Muslim culture around the burqa and the niqab, right?
Niqab, yeah. So even though the Quran does not tell women that they have to cover their faces, there are some women in Muslim societies, and it's usually related to culture, who cover their faces completely or only their eyes visible. And so that makes a woman invisible in society, right? She's just this anonymous person walking down the street. And so that's why I do just the eyes, in a sense, because that's making them invisible. However, when you walk into the room and you see all these dish towels with all these eyes looking at you, the viewer becomes the viewed.
Ah, I love it.
Which makes them visible.
Okay, now we're going to have to take a break, okay? And when we come back, I want to hear about some of the women that you interviewed. But then I want to talk about you. What caused you to pursue this, and about how you view the world right now, okay?
Okay.
All right, listeners, we're going to take a break. You've been listening to me, Ellie Krug. I've been interviewing Fawzia Kahn about her installation coming to the Hopkins Arts Center. If you like what you hear, visit my website at elliekrug.com. Email me at ellieJkrug@gmail.com. I love hearing from my listeners. We'll be back in a minute. Thanks. And we're back, Ellie 2.0 Radio on AM 950. Before we took our break, we were speaking with a physician and artist, Fawzia Kahn, about her installation, her exhibit that will be at the Hopkins Art Center. The name of the installation is Becoming Visible, and it's going to run from May 13th until June 19th. And Fawzia interviewed women located in Minnesota to show the variety, the diversity of the state. And Fawzia, before we took our break, you started to explain, that all of this is about trying to highlight how women have so many invisible roles. And you interviewed 12 different women. I happen to be one of them, and I'm really grateful that you would have selected me. But do you want to share about one of the women that, maybe has maybe an even more, compelling story than the rest, or for whatever reason, was there someone you'd like to highlight out of the 12 interviews?
Well, I hate to say highlight because they're all so different and so amazing, but I'll tell you about one of them. And her name is Nataya Stroud. And it's interesting the way I found her. My church decided to do, they have a relationship with a mosque in North Minneapolis, Masjid An-Nur. And they wanted to do StoryCorps interviews with their members, with members of Masjid An-Nur. And I happened to get paired up with Nataya. And so we did a StoryCorps interview over Zoom together. Oh. And I found her story so fascinating that I then emailed her and said, would you be part of my project? Because I think you would be wonderful. But Nataya grew up, she's African-American, she's Muslim. She grew up in North Minneapolis. To a single mother. She did have a stepfather who came into her life at age 5. And she converted to Islam when she was in high school. She married her high school boyfriend in high school and then got pregnant right away with twins. She had to go into the hospital for some preterm labor and ended up continuing her work there. She went to school afterwards for
Fawzia, I've got to interrupt you. I'm sorry. You're fading in and out of the microphone. Okay, and if you can be more direct on, it would be really great. Okay. So what we've heard is that Natalia Stroud, she was pregnant with twins. She went into the hospital, and then you sort of lost me. Go ahead.
Okay. She continued. She was very dedicated to her schoolwork, and after she had the babies, she went to an alternative school for moms. She took AP classes, and she graduated early. She went to college right away. She got an associate's degree in nursing. And all this time, she's raising the children. She basically had 6 children in 7 years.
Wow.
Was married, was living in public housing for some time, got a job while working, went back to school to get her bachelor's, then while working decided to enroll in a doctorate of nursing program. And while she's doing all of these things, she's volunteering in her community. She is helping other moms. She started a project in her home where people would donate items and she'd sort through them and clean them and have them for people to pick up and use, baby items and clothing and the like. She started a group like the Girl Scouts for Muslim girls.
Oh, love it.
Because she wanted her kids to have a place, and she was the board of Sisters Need a Place, which is a domestic violence shelter for women. She served on the state board of nursing. And she amazed me because, when I think of where she came from and her dedication to getting a better life for herself and her children. And, her husband worked that whole time as well and was starting his own business. But he had to work really hard. And on the video, she talks about how sometimes
sorry,
they feel
Fawzia,
like mom and...
Yeah, Fawzia, you faded out again. I'm so sorry.
You know what?
You say she...
It might. I'll take off my headphones if that will help. She said that she wasn't sure that her children understood. They felt that the parents weren't around for them, and yet the parents were trying to make sure that they wouldn't have to, stand in line for food stamps or at a food shelf because that's how they grew up.
So let me just stop you there. So this is a very, very important point. So she and her husband are working their tails off to provide for 7 children? Is that right?
Yep.
And of course, in our society right now, other than the pandemic, a lot of people are home, and so maybe that's a silver lining. But the way that our society works is that in order to do that, you have to leave the home and you have to work a lot of hours, sometimes a lot of hours. But her children, the messaging the children received was that you weren't here for us, right?
Right.
Okay. Yep.
I'm sure as those children get older and have their own children, they will understand.
But was she struggling with that? Was that something that hurt her heart?
Yes, of course. Yeah, when you hear that from your kids,
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, she has six children.
Okay.
But, yeah, so that's one story. I think of all the things she did to make life better for people in her community, and she continues to work 4 days a week as a nurse practitioner and teaches part-time at the University of Minnesota. She's an amazing woman.
Absolutely. Wow.
And yet she's a, quote, ordinary woman, like how many people know about her or know that story.
Well, and that's an interesting thing. I mean, my work is around human inclusivity and becoming familiar with humans. And the reality is there are so many extraordinary stories out there of people, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And some might say that about you, Fawzia, okay? Because look at you. I mean, you went from medical school and being a doctor, as you said at the start of the interview, to then being a housewife. I'm not necessarily thrilled about that phrase, but that's okay. That was a phrase you used, okay? But you're also this artist, and you're giving voice to women, and that's pretty incredible in and of itself, I would say. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you. I'm much more comfortable highlighting others' accomplishments.
Well, so let's, we have a couple minutes left, and so let's just talk about you, and if we're speaking of that. It's not a given, okay, that you would then kind of pivot away from maybe going back to, the practice of medicine after your children were raised. It's not a given that certainly you would be an artist, and certainly it's not a given that you would be an artist and go to a lot of trouble to interview people because, I mean, you spent, probably 3 hours setting up and then talking to me, and I can just imagine with all the other women. What is it about you that causes you want to make the world at least more illuminated, if not changed?
A couple of things. First, I have a lot of gratitude for my life and gratitude for the parents I had who raised me, who were wonderful parents. Gratitude that I never went hungry, that I was always clothed, that I always had a stable home. I lived in Nigeria. I'm from Pakistan. I've seen poverty. And sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Well, I'm asking what got you here because it's not a given that you would do something like this. And so what is it about, that you want to illuminate the world? Why?
My mother. My mother was an amazing woman, and she always wanted to help where she could. And she was always the person people turned to in the family to help. But she was a pragmatist as well. So I say I'm an idealist, but I'm also a realist with a dose of pragmatism. She would say, if you're going to help somebody, don't just hand them something. Help them to help themselves. Mm-hmm. So that parable of, teach a person to fish versus giving them fish. And so I guess that's really where that comes from for me, is watching her example growing up. Was, if you can't make the world a better place, why are you here? I mean, we have this short life. What are we going to do with it? Mary Oliver.
No, but Fawzia, you just, these are the words that I say and regularly but it's true, I've got to watch our time here, but Fawzia, many people want to make a difference in the world. They want to make it a better place, but they don't have the time because they have all these other obligations. So Natia, Stroud, that you just highlighted, she is the exception, that she would go out and do more, notwithstanding all of the time demands on her. And, at any rate, I think that's the thing that holds so many people back, and they're afraid, as well.
Yeah, and I think some of it is also just who you are genetically. I don't know. I mean, I have a brother. He was raised by the same parents. He is very compassionate and tender-hearted, but I don't know that you would call him an idealist. Right.
Well, listen, Fawzia, we've got to unfortunately break off, but let's just make sure for the audience again, Your installation, your exhibit is called Becoming Visible. It's going to be at the Hopkins Art Center. Give us the dates again and when you're going to speak there.
The dates are May 13th through June 19th with an opening reception May 13th from 6 to 8 p.m. And then my talk is on May 20th, which is a Thursday from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8 p.m. Yet to be decided. If anyone would like to attend those events, there is limited capacity because of COVID, so you would need to contact the Arts Center, go on their website to request an invitation or a ticket, however.
And there are other artists that are also going to be there at Hopkins at the time, and unfortunately we don't have the time for you to name them all, but you wanted to make sure that people understood there are other shows going on, other installations at the same time as yours is, and you want to make sure that folks understand that it's going to be a multi kind of faceted experience to go to the Hopkins Art Center, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, Fawzia, we've got to go, unfortunately, but I really have enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for giving me your time. Listeners, we've been speaking with Fawzia Kahn. Her exhibit, Becoming Visible, is going to be at the Hopkins Art Center beginning on May 13th. All right. When we come back from our break, you're going to get my C block talking about my work and a day that I had on Thursday. Boy, let me tell you, we'll be back in a second. Thanks. And we're back. AM 950, Ellie 2.0 Radio, Ellie Krug here. Hi. Fawzia Kahn. Hey, go out to Hopkins if you can. See your exhibit. I think that it's great. I mean, yes, I'm in it. I happen to be in it, but I'd be telling you that anyway. Okay, we're in my C block right now, and I just want to talk to you about Thursday of this week. I did 4 separate talks for 4 separate groups between 11 a.m. and 5 o'clock that day. Couple of takeaways from that. One, I'm too old to be doing 4 talks in one day. So that won't happen again. I'm pretty sure that I will tell you that. Secondly, 3 of the talks were to lawyers, and 2 of those were about allyship, about how to be active, for people who are from marginalized communities, how to actively support them. Ally is a status, allyship is action. One of those talks was about how difficult it is to talk about skin color. And then another talk I gave to the Y in one of the burbs. I'm sorry, maybe I'm not remembering which Y, but it was a really nice group of people. I talked about human and compassion and inclusivity. So here's what I can tell you from all of that experience. One, a lot of people paid attention to the Chauvin verdict. It did. That's really no surprise. But, I mean, one of the talks was to a bunch of people, a lot of lawyers in Illinois, not here in Minnesota. But they all, they paid attention to the Chauvin verdict. And what I consistently heard from people was that the trial and the verdict reinvigorated them about wanting to make change in America. And boy, that was a really great thing to see and hear as I interacted with my audiences. The problem, however, is, we humans have a short attention span. We do. No matter how much we would want to make sure our attention stays on point, it doesn't. I mean, just think of, you've been listening to the show now for 45, close to 50 minutes, maybe a little bit more than that at this point. And think of how many times you've done other things or thought of other things in the time that I've been speaking. Of course, that may just point to the fact that I'm relatively boring, although my guests are never. But, yes, I made a joke there. I hope that made you laugh or smile. But my question to my audiences yesterday was, What's it going to take to keep it from falling off the plate? Because of our low attention spans, our short attention spans. And I'm going to ask that to you, my listener. I know that many of you are socially conscious. That's why you listen to this station. I know many of you are like extra socially conscious because that's why you listen to this show. And for you, maybe it will stay on the plate a lot longer. And when I say what it is about change. It's about working. It's about actively pushing to make things better, to change the landscape, move the needle, however you want to describe it, to make America more equitable. Okay? I mean, we had President Joe this week talking about things about how we can be better to all humans. But for us individually, what are you doing to make sure it stays on the plate and doesn't fall off? I mean, for me, not that I'm anybody special, but I can safely say it never falls off the plate because this is the only work that I'm doing. This is my retirement, actually, and this is my retirement. This is my work, social justice, making the world a better place. But for those of you with the 10-hour, work days like Fawzia just talked about, the moms or the dads, they're all, both of you are out of the house. You're just struggling. You're trying to make time for your kids in between, trying to provide for them. What's it going to take for you to make sure that changing things, making things right, equalizing a totally rigged system, what's it going to take for you to keep it on your plate? So I think that we all need to bear that in mind. And we need to be conscious of the fact of how things fade away. Because you remember Governor Walz said last year, right after the unrest, we only have one more chance to fix it. And you've heard me say this before, I agree with that 100%. It falls off the plate, we're going to lose the chance. Just saying. Okay? Well, listen, I hope that you enjoy this show. I hope you tell other people about it. I would really appreciate that. I would, greatly appreciate you sharing, about me, Ellie Krug. If you have an organization you'd like me to come and speak at, reach out to me at elliekrug.com. You can reach me at elliejkrug@gmail.com. I would love to come and speak to your organization. If it's a church or a nonprofit, and if you have a short budget, we'll talk about that, okay? We'll make it work. All right, you've been listening to me. That's another show in. There we go. Big thanks to my producer, Patrick, who I keep making do math. And a big thanks to all of you. I look forward to seeing you next week, or talking to you next week at least. And in the meantime, go out, keep it on the plate, and work to make things better. Will you do that, please? All right, take care. See you next week. Bye.